Cool. So, Pete, Neil, thanks for talking to Digit. If you could just explain what you do in Microsoft, and we can start off from there.
Yeah, so I'm Neil Hutson. So I look after a team called Engineering, Engagement and Evangelism in Corp. We're responsible for helping get new and emerging technologies coming out of the engineering teams in front of developers, so they can get excited about it and build great apps.
And I'm Pete Brown. I work in Neil's organization, and I cover primarily things on Windows client, so XAML, IoT devices, and actually apps and tech for musicians.
Perfect. So I sat through the presentation that both of you gave. The very first question that I had in my mind was, it's great that you're trying to give developers all these new solutions that are in the works from Windows 10's perspective. But what happens to existing code which developers have out in the wild? How does that get ported again?
And that's a great question. All of the Windows 8, Windows 8.1 code that you've built for the Windows Store, like those applications will just run on Windows 10. So if those compiled applications will be just fine there. The code itself, depending upon where you started, like we've made a few changes since 8.1. We don't use like a snapped view anymore or other stuff. So there will be some small changes to make, but we still support all the same languages and all the same types of markup and everything else, just like we did in Windows 8 and 8.1. So it should be very easy for developers to port their code over. And in fact, one of the things that we talked about in the keynote this morning was making it possible for other developers that we haven't targeted before to also port their code over. So we're reaching even beyond the existing developer base there to web developers, iOS developers, Android developers.
And the learning curve is relatively small, right?
Yeah, if you're, I think the thing that developers will probably struggle with the most, depending upon their background, is getting used to responsive design, right?
Yes.
So it's like Neil talked about this a bit earlier, that when you target such a wide breadth of devices, which you do on most any platform now, like if you target Android, you have lots of different form factors to think about. Being able to have your design, your user interface adapt for all those different devices is probably the biggest challenge for that.
But I think the good thing is within inside the tools. So within Visual Studio 2015, we even within the free community editions, we have some great designers now. You can change the aspect ratios, resolutions, and actually see how the application will actually look. And so that's really going to help from a productivity perspective. Make sure you get it right before you even deploy it to your first device.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I mentioned Pete speak this, about this a little bit, that the focus right now is, existing focus has been devices and devices platform, and you spoke about services and services platform. If you could just talk about that a little bit more.
So actually, Neil covered services, right? So I'm going to defer to you on services platform stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, we have built, so obviously supporting many different great devices on the front end, but classic modern applications need to be connected to some back-end systems. With inside the Azure platform, clearly we support existing technologies like running virtual machines, but we also have what we announced at Build, which was called Application Services. And this allows you to host websites at great scale. It allows you to build mobile applications and connect with mobile applications, do notifications, all those great things. And it also allows you to run business processes at the back end as well. So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is that data is becoming probably the most important thing to value within your application. If you can take the data of usage patterns from consumers or customers and then predict the future, you obviously have a far more valuable application. And so with Azure, we added two new capabilities. One was a relational data warehouse called SQL Data Warehouse, and the second one was we have what's called Azure Machine Learning, which allows you to look at all that data and allows the machine to ultimately predict the future of your data and
Patterns.
patterns, and make decisions of what what your customers may do in the future. So I think they're the big things. But I think great that we can connect applications, and that's all part of app services. But then if we can take the data from those applications and add true value to it, yes.
Could you also speak a little bit about platform as a service, because it's a relatively new term?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are many different terms. There's obviously infrastructure as a service, and that's effectively I'm taking a virtualized environment that I could run on a normal personal computer or server, and I'm literally uploading it into the cloud and running it in the cloud. And the great value there is I have to do no change. I simply move that virtual machine, put it in the cloud. We also have software as a service, and that's, hey, I simply sign up to a portal and the service is available to me, and that's, in Office 365 is a classic example of that. I'm just saying, hey, I want productivity, and it suddenly appears for me. Platform as a service is that middle ground. What it means is I build my application, and I develop my APIs as normal. But what I then do is allow, in our case, Azure, to handle most of the management and monitoring for me. So it will auto-deploy the application across multiple data centers, depending on my policies, to provide great scale. It will also provide durability. If for whatever reason my application fails, it will notify that and start a new instance of that for me. It will also do patching. So if it notices that it needs to upgrade a particular node, it will do it all for me. So it means I don't need to be an administrator to keep that machine up and running. So huge value for developers, because they can really focus on writing the code, and then let Azure handle all the hard stuff.
Okay.
So you don't get a phone call at 2 a.m. in the morning saying my service is down. And the classic example we talked about is we built a site called How Old Am I for Build, which is one of our machine learning algorithms, where you place a selfie and it tells you your gender and your age. And we didn't think it was going to go quite as viral as it did, and we had 1 billion hits in the first 3 days to our website, and I think 230 million uploads of pictures.
Wow.
And that was all using websites, so it's all using platform as a service. We simply defined a policy of how much we wanted to scale, and what threshold we should simply grow to another node, and literally Azure did all the rest. So that's the value of platform as a service versus an infrastructure as a service, where you literally have to be trying to start new virtual machines yourself, keep them up to date, keep patching them, and all that other stuff that's generally hard.
Nice. Two interesting aspects you guys introduced today, at least: Windows Holographic and Windows for IoT. So, how does the developer come into the scheme of things when it comes to Windows Holographic, for example?
Windows Holographic is just a version of Windows, and it needs applications to run. So, developers need to build those applications. There are two different ways that you can build those right now. One is you can build a standard universal Windows platform app and just run it on Holographic, and you can pin it to the wall. Think of like a video player or something. You just pin it to a place in the wall, and it's what we call a flat app, right? The other thing is, if you use a tool like Unity, or if you want to do it in DirectX, of course you can start building 3D visualizations that the user is able to walk around and really kind of interact with. So they're two very different modes. I think the traditional developers will find great value in starting just right with the flat apps, because they just take their apps and they run them, and it's a universal Windows app, and it also runs on other devices. A mind for 3D stuff will love to go into Unity or DirectX and be able to create those really immersive experience that we show at Build. An example of one of those, which combines both of the things you talked about, is we showed the B-15 robot at Build, which had a Raspberry Pi as a controller on the body and also had an Arduino on it. And then the body of the robot itself was just a holographic projection, and the user interface that you used for controlling that robot and playing with its settings and changing the colors was all just in virtual spaces as a holographic projection. So combining all of those things. And the great thing is this is stuff that Windows application programmers can do. This is the same tools, the same languages, all the same things that they've been doing for the past 15 years or so, just accrue directly into working with HoloLens as well as with working with IoT.
I think the only difference, and it's not a major difference for an application developer, if you're building a 3D model, typically you decide the viewpoint.
Right.
So the camera angle is your decision based on where the object is moving. With HoloLens and Holographic, that's the opposite.
Right.
You're told where you need to project to, and obviously, as Pete was mentioning in the keynote, we have stereoscopic cameras, so you need to think about the perspective on both of those angles. So you need to change that. But other than that, it's pretty much the same.
So. Again, I mean, where does all this compute power come from, Because I'm guessing there's a array of, supercomputers or,
In the HoloLens itself?
Not in the HoloLens, but, throughout your presentation you spoke about taking away, the complexity of coding from the developer and putting it into the cloud somewhere, right? So they just need to, the designing and the deploying part is taken care of very easily. So, at the back end, what sort of machine power is deployed, to take care of these instances? Could you be willing to give us an insight into that part of?
Well,
from an Azure perspective.
Yeah, so from an Azure, we don't provide details on the actual the technical scale and specification of the machines. What we have done in the past, we are part of a work together with companies like Facebook to provide an open specification for hardware. So it makes it very, very easy for other people to understand the architecture. It also gives the OEMs an easier model to integrate. So we're doing that. Obviously 19 unique data centers around the world that provide that compute power, but but we don't really provide the details underneath.
But here, I mean, the bottleneck is your internet fiber, right, when it comes to
latency. Will always be your friend, and so the people that are smart enough from a development perspective to understand what kind of interface they need to have between the front end and back end, what elements could be cached, are always going to build the most responsive, snappy, and ultimately compelling applications.
So how are you poised to kind of rise up to the challenge of? So obviously you have a big developer base in India, right, who are developing apps for Azure and other Windows platforms. So do you have local data centers to kind of cache in, serve them in any way, or are those all located outside the border of India?
Yeah, so we're working on, obviously, our data center grows over time. So we'll keep expanding our platforms over time, and so if you look back probably 4 or 5 years ago, it was we started small, but we're also rapidly growing to make sure we give you the support.
I think it's probably fair to say that, both for Windows and for like all of our devices, all of our services, India is a very important market, and it's something we pay a lot of attention to.
Perfect. Let's talk about Internet of Things. That seems to be the buzzword this year.
Right.
What are you guys expecting in terms of some of the challenges, in kind of serving to that market, and how developers is a key component when it comes to providing unique experiences, but how do you plan to scale up or attack that market, so to speak?
There are a couple of different pieces to IoT, right? I talked about the things part this morning, right? I talked about the client devices, and we have a lot of great technology there. By having Windows on these devices, we can build upon decades of experience for security and deployment and manageability and all those things that are important in IoT. And then on the services side of things, we have lots of experience with Azure and scaling way up to meet lots of different billions of transactions and things like that. And maybe it'd be good to talk a bit about this IoT suite stuff that we're doing.
Yeah, so we have so on the services side, obviously we have IoT suite, and I think that it brings together a number of key components that you need when you think about orchestrating, the coordination with literally millions of devices in real time. And so some of the key components, obviously Event Hub allows you to connect many of these devices to accept data. We also have Stream Analytics, and Stream Analytics is kind of a real-time system that will take many points coming of data and then consolidate that into a single value. Hugely important. If you imagine, megabytes and gigabytes of data coming every second, if you're not actually doing some kind of real-time analysis on that, you will suddenly be flooded with data you can't store. And also doing anomaly detection, so detecting when there's a value which is out of range, and then be able to display that and store it. We're also putting a lot of work into how we can manage those devices on the client end as well. We have to be very careful to make sure that we've got great security of those devices. We have command and control scenarios.
Security is a big problem.
It's
right?
a huge. It will become a huge problem, and people don't want to have devices in their homes that they know could be potentially tampered with. So we're also adding capabilities there as well. So that's the spectrum. And then finally, on the very, very back end, we're back into Azure Data Lake, which is an ability to store, infinite amounts of data in a very secure way, in a high-performance way, and then also machine learning. So being able to take all that data.
Machine learning is an interesting topic, actually.
And we talked about Rockwell and Ford Motor Company. We're doing work with other manufacturers as well. So predictive maintenance is a huge area. So if you've got literally millions of cars on the road, and you can start to see themes, that's hugely valuable for you. And the big thing with Data Lake is we add security around that, because the last thing you want to do is, if you're a car manufacturer and you see a trend, you don't want other people to probably see that trend. So that's the full spectrum. But I think IoT, people think it's the device or the services. It's a full spectrum of services and technologies you need, from the device all the way through to data and machine learning.
And then we're doing some additional things on the device side, where a lot of maker projects aren't really IoT. They're really missing the internet part of that. But they're doing really interesting things with these devices, and they show up on Kickstarter and Indiegogo and places like that. And so we're also doing a lot of work to support them and make sure that we've got free tools and free operating system and free support and doing as much as possible to make it easy for them to get involved.
Perfect. I mean, you just answered part of my next question. So, what sort of educational, activities are you guys doing to kind of give developers this big picture scenario? And like you spoke about, it's not just about devices or.
And I think one of those we're here, right? This build event here is certainly an example of those types of activities, which we're doing this all over the world. I think it's 26 cities or something like that. We also make all the materials available for free on Channel 9, right? So you can watch sessions, you can see the president Neil's org here. That we do a lot of just outreach to developers in general. We have lots of GitHub projects with examples of how to do things, and then we work directly with the engineering teams to provide them feedback from the community about the examples that they're doing. And we work with other orgs. A great example of education for IoT is there's a project on GitHub called Connect the Dots. So it's connectthedots.io. And we've made it so that you can use all sorts of different types of devices, not just Microsoft devices, but you can use an Arduino or you can use a Raspberry Pi that's not running Windows. And show how that works and gets the data up through event hubs. Is able to work with Stream Analytics and how that whole process works. And by actually going through and using that and building that project yourself, it's probably the best education that you can get.
Also, the final thing is, that was very specific around IoT, but generally we're putting a lot of effort into training. We have something called the Microsoft Virtual Academy, and what we try and do is take what we present, at an event, and record it in a studio, together with cool demos and hands-on labs, and make it all available. And so you can watch the video, download the hands-on lab, and actually run through and get to know technology in quite some depth. So putting a lot of work on there, and obviously if you go to the Azure portal, Windows Dev Center. We have a lot of information there as well.
Good. Final question to both of you. A developer who has not been clued into the Microsoft ecosystem, how would what's the best way you would describe the opportunities that are currently present and what's in store for the future?
So I would focus on Windows 10. I think that's a great opportunity. And in a nutshell, for a developer, I think the opportunity here is to build a single application that you don't have to decide if it works on a phone or a tablet or a desktop PC or an Xbox or a HoloLens. You can just target all of those with the same application code and the same application package, right? We have one store across all these devices, so it's really, you build something once and really and truly you can run it across the entire ecosystem. And for me, that I would say is the single biggest value, because our ecosystem is very, very large. So especially when you start counting in existing desktops and Xboxes and everything, we have an enormous footprint out there, and we want to make it possible for developers to write applications for that.
I would say for Azure, it's we want to be as open as possible. So if you want to build using C# and MVC, obviously we're going to support you. But you want to build using Node.js. We have many different framework supports and languages we support in the platform, and we'll be very, very happy to support you on the platform. So I'm not sure we're expecting you to suddenly change what you're doing. We want you to bring the tools and techniques that you love today to the platform and be productive.
Okay. Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.